Commonplace books are having a moment. There are a lot of different ways that you can keep a commonplace book. So how do you get started, and how do you know which method is best for you? Hey, welcome to Park Notes. I'm Parker Sedecase. I'm a philosopher and theologian, and this is a channel where I help you study and think more deeply. In this video, I'm going to help you discover which kind of commonplace book is best for you. Now, in order to do so, I'm going to differentiate between 4 species of commonplace books. So make sure you watch the full video so you can become an expert in all the different types of commonplace books, and so you can know which one's best for you. This video is sponsored by Lingoda, but more on that later. Let's jump right in. Okay, so first things first, I just want to run through a quick history of commonplace books. This is mostly meant to show that commonplace books are not a modern invention. They're not just the flavor of the month or the most recent fad in productivity methods. Instead, they have ancient roots going all the way back to 335 BC with Aristotle's Commonplaces. Aristotle coined the term commonplaces in his book Topica, which is one of his 6 works on logic in his Organon. The Greek for commonplace book is koinoi topoi, and the Latin is loci communes. For Aristotle, commonplaces were a collection of forms of argumentation. Jump down to 55 BC with Cicero's De Oratore, where he expands the concept of commonplaces out beyond logic to include rhetoric. He brought this concept into the Roman world, and he added quotes along with these argumentation schemes from various authoritative figures. Skip all the way down to 95 AD with Quintilian's Institutio Oratoria, or his Institutes of Oratory. Quintilian thought that the orator ought to commit an arsenal of sententiae and arguments to memory through use of commonplace books, which serve as an artificial memory. Now, sententiae is where we get our word sentences, but back then it meant wise sayings, wise sentences, proverbs, aphorisms of the philosophers. So Quintilian expands on Cicero's expansion of commonplace books, and he extends not just to rhetoric, but to moral philosophy as well. Skip way down to 510 to 523 AD, and Boethius, in his De Topics Differentials, I don't know how to say it, he critiques people like Quintilian and Cicero and Seneca for their liberal notion of commonplace books. He wants to go back to Aristotle and say, no, these are just for collecting forms of argumentation. Boethius argued that an appeal to authoritative texts and quotes is among the feeblest forms of logical and rhetorical proof. And even though he sought to return to Aristotle's concept of commonplaces, he failed. The rhetorician's expanded concept of commonplace books went forward into the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, the Reformation, the Enlightenment. It waned a little bit after that, but now it's finding a new resurgence here on YouTube, which is awesome. So it's not just a modern phenomenon, this thing has roots. But so then what are commonplace books good for? Well, they're good for collecting quotes, wisdom, aiding in understanding and metabolizing information, and gaining propositional knowledge. Now, when it comes to knowledge, there are at least 3 important distinctions. Know that, know whom, and know how. Commonplace books are really good for know that, for propositional knowledge, knowledge of propositions, knowledge of information. But they are not the best tool for knowledge by acquaintance. Know whom, interpersonal knowledge. I could make a whole commonplace book on Teddy Roosevelt, and I can know all the propositions about him, but I still wouldn't have interpersonal knowledge of him. He wouldn't know me, and I wouldn't know him interpersonally. But that's okay. Commonplace books are not for that kind of knowledge. And maybe they're not for know-how knowledge as well. Know-how knowledge like riding a bike or speaking a new language. You could make a commonplace book about riding a bike and know all the propositional knowledge, but you still wouldn't know how to ride a bike until you gain that know-how knowledge from experience. Same thing with speaking a new language. I'm not sure how to keep a notebook for learning a new language, and I don't know that it's the best way to go about it. Instead, I would recommend something like Lingoda's Language Sprint. Lingoda is a language school with over 1,500 teachers. They offer live Zoom classes available 24/7. And they teach you in small groups of no more than 5 students per class. Lingoda offers guided curriculum for fast progress to help you achieve real language wins. They offer classes in German, English, Business English, French, and Spanish. This method works for me because I haven't figured out how to use a commonplace book to learn new languages, and because it's so easy to book a class around my busy schedule. I wear a lot of different hats, and so my work schedule is very unpredictable. But Lingoda makes it easy to plan and book my next class. I'm just getting started boning up on my Spanish with Lingoda, but I've already been able to use what I've been learning with my Honduran barber to connect with him in his own heart language. So I recommend the Language Sprint, which is a challenge to take 30 lessons in 60 days. And upon successful completion, you get 50% cash back or 30 credits towards future classes. For those of you who are ultra super learners, there's also the Super Sprint Challenge. This is where you take 60 lessons in 60 days, and upon completion, you get 50% cash back or 60 credits towards future classes. The next sprint starts on January 15th. Visit try.lingoda.com/parknotes20 for up to 30% off and get an additional $25 off with promo code PARKNOTES20 in all caps. That's PARKNOTES20 in all caps. So let's start this new year right by achieving our language goals and getting some serious language wins this year. Okay, so while commonplace books are probably not the best for know-whom knowledge by acquaintance, and probably not the best for know-how knowledge, like knowing how to ride a bike or learning a new language, they are my favorite tool for acquiring know-that knowledge. That is propositional knowledge. Knowledge of propositions, knowledge of facts, knowledge of truth, acquiring new information and successfully metabolizing it to make it your own. So in order for you to know which commonplace book is best for you, I want to classify the 4 species of commonplace books. These are different modes or methods of keeping a commonplace book. So here I'm using the logical concepts of genus, differentia, and species, not the biological one. Don't get too hung up on those words, I'll explain it all here. The genus we have in mind is a commonplace book. That's the main thing that we're looking at. And we're going to subdivide it into 4 species, 4 modes, 4 methods of keeping a commonplace book. And we're going to do that by looking at 2 different sets of differentia. Differentia is just the plural of things that help you differentiate different species amongst the genus. So again, the genus is commonplace books. There are 4 species of commonplace books, and there are 2 sets of differentia which help us differentiate the species from one another. The first set of differentia I'm calling scope. Under this category, we have general commonplace books and specific commonplace books. The second category of differentia is purpose, or telos. And here we have printed commonplace books and manuscript commonplace books. So putting these all together, we get this nice little box for differentiating, for distinguishing different species of commonplace books from each other. So one more time, the genus is commonplace book. The 2 sets of differentia are 1, the scope, general and specific, 2, the purpose or telos. Either it's printed commonplace books for reflection, contemplation, rumination, or for manuscripting, using a commonplace book to comment on a particular quote in your book or blog or Facebook post, Twitter post, wherever. So this little box will be really helpful for us. Here we have general and specific, manuscript, and printed. Utilizing these differentia, we're able to come up with the 4 species of commonplace books. The 4 species here are general manuscript commonplace book, specific manuscript commonplace book, general printed commonplace book, and specific printed commonplace book. Let's go over some examples to make this whole thing concrete. I have at least one example of each. This is my commonplace book for my Substack, Parker's Ponderings. It's a general manuscript commonplace book. It's general in that it doesn't have a specific topic. It's not about the philosophy of mind or philosophy or the simulation hypothesis. There's no specific topic. It's whatever I want to write about on my Substack. It's a manuscript commonplace book because here I'm manuscripting out my Substack articles. So here I'll put quotes that I want to exegete, that I want to comment on, that I want to annotate or analyze, or make into a syllogism or something like that. I put those in here, then I manuscript out the whole Substack piece. From here, I go on to write my Substack articles and I pump them out to you guys. If you want to receive my Parker's Pondering Substack pieces, check that link in the description. Next up, we have a specific manuscript commonplace book. Here, my example is my simulation hypothesis commonplace book. This is a specific commonplace book because it is specifically about simulation theory, simulation hypothesis, and virtual reality. So it's a limited scope. It's not about everything. It's about this specific topic. But it's a manuscript commonplace book because I don't just write quotes in here. I manuscript out posts, philosophy papers, YouTube videos, and conversations, and it functions a bit like a compendium. I want to comprehensively collect everything about simulation hypothesis. So this is a manuscript commonplace book because I'm manuscripting out different pieces that I'm going to write, but it's a specific commonplace book because the scope is limited to the simulation hypothesis. Next up, we have a general printed commonplace book. This is my bourbon-colored, murdy, creative commonplace book. This is the most general commonplace book. It's literally just my favorite quotes. These will be from novels, nonfiction books, biographies, commentaries, philosophical books, whatever I'm reading. I'll take the excerpts and put them in here. And I'll even take quotes from movies and TV shows and put them in here as well. It's a printed commonplace book and not a manuscript commonplace book because it's just quotes. I don't add my own reflections in here. I'm not manuscripting out a paper or a blog post. It's just a collection of my favorite quotes that maybe don't fit in any specific commonplace book, or maybe they do, but I also want to include them in here. This is like me creating my own favorite book. These are really easy to keep. I just put a line and the citation here, and then the quotation on the other side of the line. I come up with my own headings to help me find my favorite quotes once they're in here. Now, the term printed just comes from my study of commonplace books. Once the printing press came around, thinkers would collect their favorite quotes into one book and they would have them printed to be distributed and sold to a general population. I haven't found a better word to replace printed commonplace books, so if you think of a better one, let me know in the comments. But the key distinction between a printed and a manuscript commonplace book is that I'm just writing down the quote, I'm not adding to it, I'm not manuscripting out any paper. Now, I chose a really thick commonplace book for my general printed commonplace book because I include really long quotes in here and I want this to last. I'm creating my own favorite book, so I don't want something too small that I'll need to replace all that often. Our last species is the specific printed commonplace book. Like the last commonplace book, this one is printed and not manuscript. That means I'm just collecting the quotes in here, but unlike the last one, it's specific and not general. The specific topic of this commonplace book is philosophy. Even more specifically, it's quotes about philosophy. You may call it the philosophy of philosophy or meta-philosophy. So here I just collect quotes from philosophers about philosophy. Here's an entry from last September from Roger Scruton's Modern Philosophy. Scruton asks, "What is philosophy?" and then says, "There is no simple answer to this question. Indeed, it is in one respect the main question of philosophy, whose history is a prolonged search for its own definition." I love that. All right, so that's probably enough. We have commonplace books. That's the genus. We have two sets of differentia. One is the scope, which includes general or specific, and two, the purpose, which is reflection, contemplation, rumination alone, or manuscripting, commenting on, exegeting, adding your own thoughts to the quotes that you've collected. These two sets of differentia then give us 4 species of commonplace book: the general manuscript commonplace book, the specific manuscript commonplace book, the general printed commonplace book, and the specific printed commonplace book. I'd like to come out with a video on each one of these 4 species of commonplace books, so let me know if you're interested in that in the comments, and I'll see what I can do. All right, so that's it. Those are the 4 species of commonplace books. If you've made it this far, then you're awesome. Leave me a commonplace book emoji in the comments. And I want to hear from you guys. Which one is your favorite species of commonplace book? Also, if you can think of a different term for the printed commonplace books, I would be very grateful. For whatever reason, I can't come up with a better term than printed commonplace books. But that's going to do it for now. I'll catch you guys next time.